Mac Warner joins us on MetroNews Talkline this morning. Mac, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
It's time to lighten up your show a little bit. All this death and
yes,
murder and everything.
You're right. You're right.
Good news now.
The first hour was pretty intense, so let's switch gears here a little bit. So when you took office, how much of let's start here. Was it a concern of yours, or how much was a concern of yours that were people who were registered to vote who shouldn't be registered for a variety of reasons?
It was quite a concern. I was being told by a number of people, and I think everyone is aware of the report that was put out sometime before the whole campaign started, that West Virginia had at least 3 counties that had more registered voters than they did people eligible to vote, that sort of thing. And it just showed a lack of attention to detail to that aspect of the election process. So I made that a campaign issue, and now here on day 91 in office, I think we've got some results that show we're following through on that campaign promise.
Well, show us the results. What have you done, and what's happened?
Well, I want to emphasize, this isn't me. This is the county clerks. What I'm doing as the Secretary of State is giving them the tools to do the job that they've been wanting to do all along. So the credit goes to the county clerks. And what our office has done, particularly Brittany Westfall in our elections division, has been working very closely with the clerks, and we're using our field representatives. We have 7 field representatives out there as well, working closely with the county clerks, going into their offices. And I can tell you, having been out there in a number of counties myself here in the last couple of weeks, that there is a strong positive response to our field reps and my presence in the courthouses, where they are glad that we are giving them the tools. And I'll give you a couple of examples.
Yeah.
They have always been using the national change of address process, but that occurs every 2 years, and it's quite labor intensive. After a general election the following year is when they do that. But as you mentioned in the lead up, there are a lot of people who have moved, changed names, gotten married, deceased, whatever. There are a number of reasons these files get have extra names on there that shouldn't. And so rather than just waiting for that every 2-year process, we're bringing in more actively a couple things such as the interstate cross-check system. There are about 30 states that belong to this, and that system allows you to track duplicate voters, people who have voted in 2 states or 2 counties, or have moved and have duplicate registrations. There's a similar process, the ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, which has about 20 states that belong to that. And again, they track some of these same processes. The states, some of them overlap. West Virginia is one of those states that it belongs to both of them. And then it gives us that access to these other 20 states in one, 30 states in the other. And then we take that information, Brittany Westfall in our office in the elections division, gives that to the clerks, and we flag those and say, here are individuals you ought to look at that were once registered in your county. And then the clerks actually go through and remove those names. Now, prior to my taking office, those clerks had to go in and almost do this they did have to do it one at a time and take those names off. It was a very laborious process. What we have done is allowed Brittany, through the contract firm that does this for us, write a script and track down all those names at one time. So over there in Wood County, Mark Rhodes said that he was able to do in 10 minutes what previously would have taken him 3 weeks to do. And that's what we're seeing across all 55 counties. And in fact, just in this last week, we got to them the names of convicted felons. And once you're a convicted felon, you're no longer eligible to be registered to vote.
Well, let's run through some of these. How many outdated names have the clerks taken off of the rolls?
As of today, 47,490 have been removed.
And this is for a variety of reasons, right?
Yes. So across the state of West Virginia. Now, what that represents, we're approaching 4% of the total number of people registered in West Virginia. The number on the road been taken across the state. Of those felons that I mentioned, 1,116 names have been taken off the list of convicted felons.
Okay, so 1,170 of the 47,490 that were taken off were convicted felons who don't, by the nature of their conviction, have the right to vote, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So why would is it the same systems that you use to get the felons off the rolls as well? By the way, do we know if they voted, the convicted felons?
Well, those sorts of things are going to be looked into. There's a process for investigating each of these type different situations where somebody voted twice or voted in 2 states, or there are a number of different ways that we look at this. And so we're going to take the process very seriously. We're going to investigate those that come up flagged, but I'm not at liberty to speak about any specific case, but I can tell you, yes, we are looking into those.
Well, let me ask you a little bit more about that. Mac Warner's with us, West Virginia Secretary of State, and working with the 55 county clerks. They've taken 47,490 outdated names off of the state's voter rolls since Warner took office in mid-January, and 1,170 of those that have come off the rolls were convicted felons, and by the nature of their conviction, do not have the right, are denied the right to vote. So are those people, Mac, are they criminally liable for voting, or is it just they voted?
Well,
so how does it, what's the deal?
If any of them did in fact vote, yes, they would have been. But right now, we have just removed their names now. The clerks have removed their names from the list, so they would not be eligible to vote, would not be able to vote. Right. In upcoming elections.
But you're yeah, right. So are you going to, let me be clear about this. Do you have the resources, or do you have the time, or is it worth it to look into it to see if any of those 1,170 voted?
Yes, especially when we get into the ERIC process that I mentioned, the Electronic Registration Information Center, they should be able to provide some of that sort of information for us.
Okay. All right, so you have that you're looking into, and is it same with the outdated names to see if they voted and weren't really eligible to vote? But wouldn't that, well, I'm trying to think whether that would turn up in the process when you go to vote, but I guess not. I don't know.
Well, there's deceased peoples. If we see where a person who is deceased, their name voted a ballot, that would be a potentiality. People that voted in both West Virginia and Kentucky might be a situation. People who voted in Pendleton County and then moved across and voted in Hampshire County, those type situations.
Okay.
These information center data collection processes would identify those, would flag those. Then we begin the investigation. We get back with the clerks, and we have our own investigative team and so forth to look into those situations.
So some of these might just be that I moved from Morgantown to Charleston and I left my registration here, but I have new voter registration in Charleston and I voted there. I didn't vote here. So it's just I'm on the roll someplace I shouldn't be. That's all, right?
Exactly. And that's what I would suspect the majority of these names are. And the key there is to get them off the list, and it does a number of things. One, it removes an opportunity for an irregularity to occur, for somebody to apply for an absentee ballot and vote your name up in Morgantown when you're back in Charleston, that sort of thing. But more importantly, one, it just cleans up that voter roll, so de facto, you're going to have a higher voter turnout when you remove those names that are not, are deceased or moved and so forth. And it's going to restore confidence in the elections. Let me give you one quick example. In one West Virginia county, 9,000 names came off the voter list. So they went from 22,000 to 13,000 when this cleanup process occurred. And so you can
Wait a minute, hold on a second. And maybe will you identify that county?
Well, for a variety of reasons. I'd rather not right at the moment. It's going to be made available. But the key there is to know that the clerk is working and to get that situation cleaned up. The point that I'm wanting to make is if you had an election where 10,000 people voted in that county, if you had 23,000 names on the list, you have less than a 50% turnout. If you have 13,000 names on the list, you have a 80 or 85% turnout. Which one are the people going to have more confidence in? It's going to be that one with 85% turnout, and whoever gets elected is going to be able to act with much more confidence, knowing that the majority of the people in that county did vote during the election, and they elected that specific representative.
So let me go back.
Let me go back here. Confidence.
Yeah, I agree. Mac Warner's with the Secretary of State. So you're saying one county, which you today are not willing to identify, that they had 9,000 of their 22,000 voters on the rolls should not have been on the rolls.
That's correct. Now, and let me be frank, I'm not necessarily taking credit for that. In fact, that occurred prior to my taking office. I'm using that simply because it's the most dramatic cleanup effort that occurred.
Okay, so that was during
counties.
That was during tenant's tenure, and a clerk in that particular county got the roll cleaned up.
Yes, and they are continuing that cleanup effort today with these new tools, so it continues to occur.
Okay, all right. Well, you got to. I mean, you're right. I know that sometimes that clerks are differential to leave people on there in case, I mean, if they're dead, they're not going to vote even in West Virginia these days. But just in case, I guess they're left. I don't know what, or was it just like, well, we never got around to it, or it's just too hard to get those names on.
I think it was too hard, and they were also waiting for that every 2-year process. They think, well, we'll get around to it. We have to do it every 2 years, so let's just wait until that time. And what we're doing is emphasizing an ongoing basis. And what's going to happen is this year, there's going to be a huge amount of work for these clerks as we bring in each one of these. We just brought in the Department of Corrections list this last week. We're bringing in the interstate cross-check information. That is just now arriving at our office. The electronic registration information data is going to add more names. And these clerks are going to have all of this work to do this year, but this is the year to do it. This is not the general election year and that sort of thing.
Right.
Once we get it cleaned up, then in future years, the work is going to be much more even, less work to do over time because we've done the heavy lifting during this first year.
So, Mac, when your office says there are 1,233,702 registered voters in the state, you have a high degree of confidence that, in fact, is there. I mean, we won't be exact, but that you have a high degree of confidence, though, that's an accurate figure?
Let me tell you this. By the time we're through with this process, I'd say by the end of the year, we will have taken off probably 10% of the names, 10, and it could even be higher. We're expecting over 100,000, maybe as many as 150,000 names to eventually be taken off the list. At that point, then I will be confident, a high degree of confidence, that these lists are tight, that we have the elections process ready to go for the next general election. And I think everyone will see a higher voter turnout and have much more confidence in the electoral process. And also keep in mind, at the same time we're doing this, taking the names off, the clerks are very aggressive in getting people on, the new 17, 18-year-olds, through several programs we have working with high schools throughout the state. We're encouraging voter registration. So this isn't just getting names off the list, but it's getting names on the list of people who want to vote, be active and participate in our election process.
All right, Mike Warner, West Virginia Secretary of State. Mac, thanks for coming on. Interesting numbers. I appreciate your time. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you, Hoppy.